Hello again. I have, of course, spoken on this subject at great length in the past, but from all that I'm able to apprehend, little success I've had in getting my point across. What is this point? That is simple enough and may be summed up in a single sentence. Racial prejudice is irrational and harmful, but acknowledging inherent differences in cognitive ability and other character traits between different ethnic groups is not. In other words, when I meet a Chinese person who is a stranger to me, or a white person or a black one, I cannot begin to make a guess about his intelligence or propensity for violence, laziness, empathy, honesty, or any other trait. The same applies for meeting anybody in the world of any ethnicity. I can make no useful deduction about any individual based upon skin color or ethnicity. Racial prejudice of this kind is foolish and dangerous. When we talk about racism, though, it's rather different because we are thinking of averages and percentages as found in a large population. This is useful and sensible. If I'm running a hospital in an area which contains a large number of people from Ghana or Uganda, it makes sense to plan for services for people with sickle cell anemia. This is a matter of statistics. If I meet a single Ugandan, I cannot, of course, assume that he has sickle cell. That would be a prejudice. For a large human population, though, we can and do make rational judgments on likelihoods of various things. How does this tie in with scientific racism? It's easy enough to explain. Some human characteristics are entirely inherited, and others are wholly a product of their environment. Eye colour is simply something one is born with, and it has nothing at all to do with upbringing or environment or diet or anything else. One might have brown eyes or blue, and there's an end to the matter. The ability to read or handle integral calculus, on the other hand, is entirely environmental and has nothing to do with genetics. It is something which must come from outside. Some human characteristics are the product of both nurture and nature. Intelligence and height are examples of such things. Our genes might predict how tall we can grow, but whether we do in fact do so will depend upon getting correct nutrition in childhood. Intelligence too is partly inherited from our parents, but whether we fulfill that potential is down to education. A child of brilliant parents, geniuses, who is raised in deprived circumstances, lacking in stimulation, and who is never taught to read and write, might well end up with a pretty low intellectual ability. We see this kind of thing at work in this country in people of Bangladeshi ancestry. Bangladeshis tend to be shorter than the average white Englishman. This is partly because of genes and partly because of a restricted diet without very much protein. Children of Bangladeshi parents born in this country, though, and raised on a protein-rich European diet, will typically be taller than their parents. In America, the same thing is seen with people of East Asian heritage. Now, since we know that intelligence is at least partly inherited, we can probably assume that just as with height, some populations are more greatly endowed with it than others. There is certainly evidence to suggest that this is so, but the very idea is fiercely rejected by many people. This rejection stems not from evidence, but rather from ideology. People have got it into their heads that such ideas are harmful and can lead to racial prejudice. There is something in this, of course, because unless you understand that we are talking in terms of percentages and also a quality which is greatly modified by upbringing, education, and diet, then you might simply assume that all Chinese people are more clever than all white people. who are in turn more clever than all black people, which would be preposterous. A few moments' thought will soon show us how foolish such an idea would be. The differences in cognitive ability or intelligence are not likely to be huge, and they would in any case only show up noticeably at the extremes of very high or very low intellectual ability. Then too, this initial potential has in an adult been modified by upbringing and environment. Because when we meet a stranger we know nothing of his or her education and childhood, it would be mad to try and predict a level of intelligence based only on skin colour. This is why racial prejudice in this matter is absurd. We must get to know a person if we wish to know anything useful or true about that individual. What this means on a practical level is that I might meet a Chinese person who inherited a certain potential for intelligence about which I have no idea. I don't know his parents. He was then educated in a certain way and to a certain level, which might have enhanced or diminished that potential. I can therefore know nothing about his intelligence whatsoever until I get to know him. So far, so good. I seriously doubt if I've said anything to which anybody could possibly object or consider racist. This is because I have so far been talking about individuals. When we look at entire human populations, though, things are a little different. What might not show up in one person will almost certainly do so if we take 10,000 people. In other words, if it is true that some groups tend to have lower intellectual than others, intellectual ability that is, for example, those of East Asian heritage tend to inherit more potential than white European people, then looking at the academic achievement of a large sample will show that more of them have studied hard subjects at difficult to get to universities, things such as physics or medicine. This is, of course, what we actually do see. One only needs to walk around Oxford to see how many East Asian students have obtained places there to study. In other words, we can probably generalize about large populations in a way that we cannot about individuals. Why should anybody look into this matter, though, and bother to investigate it? Well, if what I've been saying is true, then it might explain things such as the fact that Chinese students in Britain do better at A-levels than black or white students. It might go some way towards telling us why Indians are more likely to be high earners than white people in this country, and 1,000 other things. If so, then we could stop blaming racial prejudice for such inequalities and simply accept that it's a natural feature of humanity rather than a wicked and covert conspiracy being operated by white people against those of sub-Saharan African ethnicity. In other words, it might remove some of the poison that's circulating in our society, which is caused by the idea of things like institutional racism.